Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I would like to discuss console exclusives. So of course, recent news has come about that Halo is officially finally coming to PlayStation. We're getting Halo Campaign Evolved, so we're getting a full-on remake. They're adding a couple things in, changing some things around, and we are getting a straight-up full-on remake of the very first Halo game. Very interesting, to say the least. Of course, we recently had Gears, which was more of a super duper update because it was like the remaster of a remaster, so it was in in 4K 60 frames instead of 1080p. But that was on PlayStation. It was like, okay, there it is, it's happening. We were starting to get a few more exclusives, and we're kind of waiting, like, all right, well, where's Starfield at? Because that's a part of the whole Xbox Bethesda thing where it's like, it's an exclusive, but like, we know it's going to hop over. And now they're like, hey, Halo is coming over. Starfield's going to be in there somewhere soon, where it's like, hey, surprise. I'm surprised they didn't do that for, well, I guess it wouldn't make sense for Fallout Day, but they could have done anything for that and it would have been better than what they gave us, but it doesn't matter. I wanted to talk about console exclusives because things are changing. Heck, there's the whole discourse on the internet because the literal effing White House is posting memes about like the console wars being over, which I don't know what some people love it, some people hate it. I'm in the camp of, I don't understand why anyone would be, well, granted, if you like Trump, I guess you're like losing it over that, but I'm more in the vein of, how are you falling for this when they clearly don't care about gamers? I literally put that, I was like, the government does not care about gamers, and they definitely don't. Like, they were just talking about how they're still talking about how games are the reason people are violent and stuff. Like, they just did that like a couple years ago. Like, they don't give a crap. But of course it makes them look good, so whatever. Like, that's not what this is about. This is about like just the games in general. So console exclusives changing up, specifically between PlayStation and Microsoft, because let's be honest, I can't even bring in Nintendo and be like, you guys think it'll happen? It won't. I mean, maybe in another, I don't know, 50 effing years? Another 50 years, I'd be like, all right, in 50 years, I'll give you Nintendo might start switching over, but no time soon. They like to have their stuff in their own location. They don't want you modding anything. They don't want you changing stuff. They like what they like, and what they like is their own stuff. They will destroy you for doing anything. They'll destroy you for talking about it. They won't go after the government, but hey, that's a different story as well. But Nintendo likes to do their own thing, and they like to keep everything to themselves. So I don't see anything like that changing. I mean, the craziest thing in the world was the fact that they made mobile games. The Mario, I think it was Mario Run, if I'm not mistaken, and then the Mario, I don't remember the name of the Mario Kart, but I know they had a mobile Mario Kart as well. And those two alone were like, holy crap, Nintendo is doing mobile gaming. That in itself was absolutely insane, because it was like, that's just something they never really did. They always had their handheld stuff, but to do mobile gaming was insanely different. And now we're at the point of, obviously not with them, but questioning between Xbox and PlayStation, well, what ends up happening? There's the whole idea of like, well, are we going to end up getting, Spider-Man on Xbox? Are we going to get, like Uncharted and stuff like that? Are they going to bring those games over and, put that kind of effort in? It's an interesting thing to think about. Like, even if they did do that, would it be in the vein of having like updated remasters? Or, I mean, at this point, I guess it would be good enough if you just did like a PS5 version. Technically, Uncharted 4 has a PS5 version, so you could just throw that over to Xbox. The Legacy of Thieves collection, it's Uncharted 4 and Uncharted Lost Legacy in 4K, and then you could just throw that on Xbox, and it's like, boom, there you go. That's Uncharted. They wouldn't do the first three unless they did what they did with Halo, and it's like, hey, we're doing a full-on remake, because at least the very first one was on PlayStation 3, which I would love a remake of the first Uncharted anyway. But unless they did that, I don't really see them putting too many things on Xbox. It would have to be all their modern stuff. I don't know if they would go backwards and be like, hey, we're doing full-on remakes. But I wouldn't hate it if they did. I'm definitely not the type of person that's like, oh man, console exclusives and stuff. Like, I've always thought it was stupid. Like the whole console war thing where people are just like, I only play this and you suck if you play this. Like there's, like all the names on it's like Sony ponies and Xbots and stuff. Is like, all of that is dumb to me. Like, I buy games that I like. That's it. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of things that are stupid when people complain about video games, and it's like, just play games. If you like a game, just play that game. If you can afford to get the console to play that game. That's it. That's all there is to it. Like, if it's exclusive, so what? If that's what you want, just go play the game. I've never understood it because it's idiotic, personally. Like I think I've mentioned this before. If I had to pick, I'm more of a PlayStation guy. I've just always been that way. That's just naturally how it started because, you're like me, you probably started with Super Nintendo. It's like, all right, I played that, had those, they were fun. And then PlayStation comes out and it's like, oh, this is different. You play on discs and it's in 3 dimensions and stuff like that. Like things changed when the PlayStation came out. And of course, that's where I got introduced to like some of my favorite franchises, like including my favorite one, shout out Resident Evil, as I do in these episodes. So I got a couple of my favorite franchises from, just from PlayStation alone. And then moving forward, it was like, all right, yeah, I ended up getting an Xbox. I had an Xbox 360. And like most people, when the 360 came out, that was the game. That was the console. It was like, hey, you get a 360 because why the F are you getting a PlayStation 3? That junk costs $600 and there's not really much on there. So you get a 360. That's somewhere in that conversation, the Wii pops up and you get a Wii if you can. And then you get those. And then eventually when the PS3 Slim comes out, now you can afford a PlayStation 3. And that's how it went. It's like I experienced all those consoles. PlayStation was the last one. And then when it went forward, it was like, okay, well, I went with PlayStation 4 over Xbox, which kind of, all they did was flip it. It was like PlayStation was excessively expensive, and then Microsoft was like, well, we're gonna make ours excessively expensive. You guys want a camera you'll never use? We're gonna slap it in the box an extra $200, or it was maybe an extra 100 and something, but it was overpriced and it wasn't doing anything, and it was like, I'm good. Don't really have many exclusives anyway. That was always like the big thing when it came to Xbox, was they never really had enough exclusives for me to care anyway, because they had Halo. Barely ever played Halo. They had Gears. I like Gears of War. I played the first and second Gears. I've never played any after that because I never owned any of them. And then that was it. Never really, like I said, pretty much never played Halo, barely played Gears, and that was all they had. For like an eternity, that's what it felt like. And then everything else that might have been exclusive, I just didn't care about. So it wasn't relevant to me. And now we finally get to this point where Xbox's whole thing for me has been, if I get a new console, I can play my 360 games in like 4K. Like the free upscaling and all that is really like the main appeal. I can go back to older games. I can play some older games I missed. I've mentioned it a million times, like, man, at some point I'm gonna get a more modern Xbox console, and then I'll finally be able to play Ninja Gaiden Black in the OG version of Ninja Gaiden 2. But the exclusives have never been that big of a deal for me. It's, hey, I would prefer it if every console had every game. That's always been my personal preference. Not to try to throw Nintendo in there. That would be amazing, but once again, they would never allow that to happen because they're weird and they just want to do what they want to do. So it is what it is, unfortunately, with them. But Xbox and PlayStation, two sides of the same coin, because Nintendo's just off doing their own thing, and now we have officially entered this era of Halo is coming to PlayStation. If I cared that much about Halo, maybe that would have been a bigger deal to me. And I think if it was the first thing and we hadn't been leaning towards this so hard, I guess it would have surprised me. Like, honestly, the most surprising thing is the fact that it's a remake. That shocked me more than anything else. I really thought that it was just gonna be like, hey, they're gonna throw the Master Chief Collection on there. But they're like, no, we're gonna do like a full-on remake. And I was like, oh, well, that's probably the most surprising part of it, as a whole to me. Because are they gonna remake all the games now? Because that might get me in. If they actually commit to that, and it's Halo, it's gonna make money. Like, honestly, there's no doubt in my mind that a full-on remake, because it doesn't matter if it's on PlayStation or not, it's a full-on remake. Kind of like what they did before, where it was like, hey, Combat Evolved, and then, well, that's the original, of course. I forgot what they even called it, but when they did that first update, and I still remember that being like the first time I ever saw a game have the files of the original underneath, where they're like, yeah, if you just push this button, it was basically like select or whatever back in the day. It was like, yeah, if you hit this, it automatically switches to the old version of the game. And I was like, that is the coolest thing on planet Earth. And I have been saying this ever since that happened. That's been like, what, over a decade at this point? I feel like that's almost 20 years old, honestly. But ever since that happened, I've said every single game should do that, and no one has ever done it since. I think that's the only game that's ever really done it. They probably did it in the second Halo game too, I don't really remember. But I remember when that happened, and I was like, every single remaster should do this, or a remake. At the time, I feel like we considered that a full-on remake because the graphics were so different. Same thing with Campaign Evolved coming out, but I thought it was so cool, and it's just one of those weird things where I'm like, why hasn't anyone ever used this again? Well, why isn't it just like, hey, boom, here you go? Like, I know there's tons of remakes and stuff. I mean, how you go with the Silent Hill games, they didn't even have the file, so they literally had to like re-record stuff, and that's why the HD Silent Hill games came out kind of crappy, so that was unfortunate. But there's so many like remakes that have hit where I was just like, dang, why don't we have this? Why is it that we don't have games that come out and then it's like, yep, you just hit this button and boom, you got the classic right underneath? I always thought that was super weird. Like, I'm surprised the Crash Bandicoot games didn't have that. Didn't Spyro get a remake too? They could have done that there as well, but that's just something that popped into my head because I haven't thought of that in forever. But Halo did that, and then like it seemed like nobody else ever did it again. I was like, that seems so weird. Like, just throw it right underneath. It's basically like, what, 2% of everything you've recreated is like the original game. Like, old games are so small now compared to what we have now. It's like, hey, it's not even a full gigabyte. Sometimes it's how it feels. But getting back to the actual topic at hand with crossovers, I think it's a good thing. That's where I'm at. You know, I know there's the Xbox people that are really weird, that are like losing their mind because I think Xbox has been screwing up way worse. Like doing console, like that's the funny thing to me. There are people that are pissed about this, and I'm like, if anything, this is probably the best thing they've actually done in the last year. Between the price hikes, what, 4 times over, console-wise and Game Pass-wise, then like this, everything's an Xbox. This is like all of the weird stuff that they've been doing. The element of them closing down a bunch of effing companies all over the place, where it's like, we're doing amazing, but also you go F yourselves, you're fired. Like, they've done far worse things than just be like, hey, we're officially bringing Halo to PlayStation. That's like the only good thing I think they've done all effing year. That, you know, personal opinion, but I'm not someone that's crazy about like, hey, it has to be exclusive, or what's the point of buying this if it's not exclusive? I think you just buy whatever console you want. Like, if they're all the same, you just buy whichever one is technically more powerful, and that's pretty much it. Or whichever one's more affordable. Like, that's kind of the whole point of like that balancing act, where you determine what you're gonna get. For me, the exclusives for PlayStation is what did it, because Xbox didn't have enough, so it didn't matter anyway. Like, that's almost the weird thing about it. It's like all they had was Halo, and it was like, yeah, whatever. Like, one exclusive isn't gonna do the trick compared to PlayStation, which is like the main spot for exclusives. So I always found it interesting where it was like this weird blend of the consoles being an issue for people, but it's like Xbox doesn't have anything anyway, really. You know, they did their stuff with Bethesda, and how long did that last? Because Indiana Jones was there in like 2.5 seconds. This guy in front of me decided to slow down instead of go forward when this 18-wheeler came up. That was not a good idea. But anyway, it's interesting because of where things have been that people are freaking out over Halo coming to PlayStation, because it hasn't really been, and I haven't even touched on like the PC side of things, because that's always been like that weird, it's almost like the Nintendo element where it's like, yeah, it's a PlayStation exclusive, but also it's on PC. Or, you know, it's Xbox exclusive, but also it's on PC. You know, like it's that weird, once again, a different kind of in-between, where if you go console exclusive, you know, it's like a timed exclusive, at least for PlayStation. I mean, with Xbox, they typically do day and date. So it's not even really a timed exclusive. It's just like, hey, it's on Xbox and also it's on PlayStation, or it's on PC. That's not always the case. Of course, like I mentioned, some of the older games, if you're going Game Pass, you have PC Game Pass, and then you have, you know, like console Game Pass. So there's a huge difference there. You know, that's a part of with the whole ROG Ally Xbox Series, or I don't know if Series is in it. They really got, man, this next Xbox just needs to be called like the Xbox. They just need to call it the Xbox again. Just make it simple. Like, we're calling it the Xbox. Like, I don't know what they're gonna do, but they need to switch it up or something. I don't know. Maybe they need to finally go with one of their code names, because every time they've had a code name, I wish I could remember what they're, except for like Project Natal, which I think ended up being the Kinect. But I feel like every time they had a code name for the actual Xbox consoles, they were always way sweeter than the names they came up with. I can't remember what they are now, but I always remember thinking like, man, I wish they just used that name. It's like with the Wii. They should have called that the Revolution. They should have stuck with Nintendo Revolution. It would have been an even better name because it literally revolutionized gaming. But I always thought Revolution sounded a million times cooler than the Wii, and it still does. But it's like, all right, you know, you change it to Wii because like we would like to play. Like, I get it for marketing purposes, but Nintendo Revolution is still going to be a much cooler code name than Nintendo Wii. That's just a fact of life. But whatever they call the next Xbox, it's, you know, especially with these rumors, it's basically going to be a console and a PC anyway, and then that gets into a brand new element of just what the F does that even mean? Because they're talking about Steam. Like, honestly, if it comes out to be an Xbox branded console that is also as powerful as a PC. If it's $1,000 and it's like buying a gaming laptop, right? I think if it really does have Steam on it, and it's like, hey, you can carry this around. It's at least a certain weight or width or whatever, and it's like having a laptop. It's more powerful. If it has Steam on it and you have a console that can literally just be like, hey, here's my Xbox console, and it downloads, you can literally just download Steam games to it, and people will actually have that as their main Xbox experience, that could work. I think it'll blend things together. It'll help more, because I'm sure there are tons of people, as many nerds as there are out there playing video games, there's a buttload of people that still don't do PC gaming. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, it's just getting bigger and bigger, especially with the pandemic. It was like, hey, you can either get a console or you can check PC. And if you're watching people, odds are, if you're watching streamers, they're most likely doing it on PC. Like, most people will tell you, like, yeah, I stream on PC, like, because you can get most games there now. If it's PlayStation, you'd probably have to like wait a year or so if you're trying to get those exclusive games. But other than that, most of the time it's like, yeah, it's on PC. It's on all consoles, including Steam. Or if it's not, people will hate on the Epic Game Store. Check out the Epic Game Store, free games every Thursday. It's worth checking out at the very least. But when it comes to console exclusives and all that stuff, it's already been, shifting over the past couple of years. Xbox basically was like, hey, we're console exclusive, but also on PC. And then PlayStation was like, all right, we're console exclusive for about a year or so. They still keep their games on there a little bit longer, and that's been a bit of a conversation piece in the past couple years as well, where it's like, all right, well, Xbox does it instantaneously, but PlayStation is like, no, we still want you to kind of get the console. Sure, there are definitely going to be tons of people that do wait the extra year, maybe 2 years, depending on the game, but a lot of people are just going to be like, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and just buy it now because I want the game now. I'm not going to wait for it to come to PC. So they still stick with the element of like, all right, it's a timed exclusive, but it's still exclusive for a decent chunk of time. And then Xbox already throws it right on PC. And at this point, they'll probably just be throwing it right on PlayStation as well. And I don't think it's a problem. I've never thought it was a problem. I've always been of the mindset of like, hey, I want everyone to be able to experience games. You pick one console, it's like, oh man, I would love to try that game out. Or, back in the day, kind of the classic thing, like, man, if I had this console, I probably would have been into that franchise. Or if I was able to, if my parents could get me these consoles when I was a kid, or even as an adult, if I could afford, both consoles, maybe I would have been into this franchise more. Or heck, I would be able to experience it in general, because there are franchises that you still can't. Even if you have Uncharted 4 on PC, you can't get Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 on PC. You still have to get at the very least, you still have to get a PlayStation 4 to experience those games, unless you really do want to go backwards and get a PS3, which would be insane. But at the very least, you can get a PS4 and then you get like the Uncharted collection of the first 3 games, but they never put that on PC. So there's still the element of like, hey, there are just things that are going to be missed unless you find a way to go backwards. So I don't know. I personally, I don't find this to be an issue. I know, like I said, I've never been super crazy where it's like, oh my goodness, I'm all PlayStation all the time. Screw Xbox, they suck. And like, I'm just not that dumb that I need to argue with people on the internet about what console is better, because I could not possibly care less. I'm not rich. I don't have time to waste on stupid conversations like that. I have a PlayStation 5. I wish I had an Xbox Series X. They're expensive though. And plus, and I've mentioned this a couple times, every single time I want to buy a console, it's always like 2 minutes away from them saying, and we're working on the next one. And I'm like, well, I'm not gonna spend the money on this, because every time I'm even close to thinking about getting an Xbox, they're like, and we got the next thing coming out too. Even though this next one, with all the rumors, I honestly do think it's gonna be like around $1,000. I think it's gonna be like a gaming laptop. I really believe that they are just gonna go all in on that and just blend things together and be like, hey, this is what Microsoft does, and this is what we decided to do. We're just gonna make our console a PC now, and everything else is an Xbox as well. So what do? We just make a PC that's an Xbox. So we'll see what happens with that and how things go moving forward when it comes to consoles. I think at this point, PlayStation is the one, well, like I said, Nintendo, it's so funny to be like, it's always just PlayStation, Xbox, because Nintendo was always on their own. But I feel like PlayStation is probably going to keep their stuff to themselves for a little bit. Maybe they'll stick to the 2-year window, and then maybe that's how they'll do their exclusives instead of it just going to PC. Maybe they'll be like, hey, now that we're doing, now that the console wars are over, which technically Xbox lost, just to throw that out there, that means they lost. But with everything being that way, if PlayStation wants to do what Xbox is doing, they can still stick to the 2-year plan and be like, hey, after a year, here you go. This is, this game on console now, and you can get it on Xbox if you want to, as well as PC. So I feel like that's how they're gonna handle it, because they seem to, their thing is, with PlayStation, they're very direct, whereas like we have PlayStation and that's about it. They're very akin to Nintendo when it comes to that, even though Nintendo's always doing their own stuff. I always felt like PlayStation and Nintendo were much more similar, oddly enough, even though they always consider themselves like separated, like because Nintendo just does Nintendo stuff. So I've always thought they were more akin to each other than even Xbox, because it's been a minute since Xbox has been like on console and stuff. Like I remember, here's something super random. My first ever Steam game was Bulletstorm. Fantastic game, still mad it didn't get a sequel. I know I've mentioned that before, but when I had that, I'm pretty sure even back then, that was an Xbox exclusive. That was on the 360, and when I got it on Steam, that was the first time I found out that you could log into your Xbox like ID, you could like log into Xbox, and even though I didn't have Xbox Live, when it's on PC, it counts as being Xbox Live and it's free. And I was like, I had no idea that was a thing, because it was literally my first ever Steam game. So they've been doing that for a super long time, where it's like, hey, if you get Xbox, you have Xbox exclusively on console, but also if it's a game that's on PC, it's basically the Xbox version of that same game. And so I've always found that to be really interesting. And so I feel like they've been doing that for so long, it's not even anything new for them. It's honestly just a part of having an Xbox, is that, yeah, a bunch of their games are just on PC. Always have been. Even if it doesn't count as like an Xbox exclusive, it's typically the Xbox version of the game. And of course that was simply due to the fact that it was like, hey, well, Xbox, Microsoft does PC. Everyone that's playing on PC, until very recently, it was like, well, if you're playing on PC, you're using an Xbox controller or like another custom one. And you could technically use PlayStation controllers if you did some workarounds. And now it's finally at the point of like, we got to the PS5, and now you can just use your PS5 controller, and it's just like, poof, here you go. You plug it in like an Xbox and it's set. So Xbox has always been a bit of an outlier when it's like, sure, you can say console exclusive, but it's always been a little bit different. So I'm curious to see where things go, specifically for PlayStation, because I feel like Xbox, it's always been that way. It's really funny, like the console wars are over because of Halo, but I'm like, it was kind of over when last year it was like, look at all these exclusives, and then this year, look at all these exclusives that came to PlayStation. It's like, what? They were over already. They already did it last year. They already said everything was exclusive, and then that already died off. So it's been over. It's just funny to be like, it's over now because of Halo. It's like, no, it was over a long time ago when every Bethesda game was supposed to be exclusive, and then they instantly stopped doing that. Like Starfield's a holdout, but no one cares about Starfield, so who cares? But anyway, would love to know your thoughts on the console wars being over, the exclusives ending and all that stuff, and how they've technically been over for a long time anyway. But I would love to know your thoughts on all things console exclusives. Are you happy? Are you mad? Do you not care because it's video games? Just play some effing games. Like, it's not that serious. And I say that as someone that loves video games. Like, I find it odd how over the top people get about video games. I'm like, I love video games. It's like it's literally my favorite medium on the planet. No, it's still not that serious, people. But would love to know your thoughts, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.